All right, everybody, continuing with Chapter 2. Self-awareness helps you to discover and correct problems with your speech by observing what's happening to your body physically. So if you kind of watch your own body language, you might be able to recognize some of the ways that you're making certain problems in terms of the way that you're speaking. You can see the way that you're breathing. You can see your movement. You can possibly see if you're looking kind of awkward because you're feeling kind of awkward and then the sound comes out kind of awkward. You can tell those sort of things. If you are aware of what you're doing, how you're behaving, and how that is impacting the way that you're sounding, you're pretty well on your way to improving the way that you do voice acting. Also, it's good to get another person's perspective. Get another set of ears to listen to you. In particular, speech therapists, not necessarily a bad thing. Vocal coaches also can be invaluable to improving your speaking voice. They can hear things that you don't necessarily hear. They might catch problems that you never thought were problems and help you to be able to address those and to become better. So let's take a look now at some different problems that people may have. First off, let's look at unclear diction or a lack of speech clarity. This is usually the result of not carrying a thought through into words. So if you're slurring your words, they're kind of jumbled up together, it may mean that you're not completely thinking on track with the message that you want to say. Inappropriate inflection or attitude can be a problem here. Starting a new thought without completing the first thought, doing like run-on sentences, just zooming from one thought to the next, and next, and next, and next, and next. So as I was speeding up there and just had so many things going on, you heard that I lost my articulation. It even causes stuttering sometimes if you're not thinking clearly about what it is that you want to say. If you're trying to find the words, it's a problem. To correct the problem of unclear diction or lack of speech clarity, you need to have a clear understanding of each thought before you speak it. And once you have that understanding, then speak slowly, or at the very least, speak slower. There are times where it calls for someone to speak rather quickly. But to begin with, especially if you're having problems carrying the thought through, if you're having problems kind of understanding where you are in the scope of the sentence, in the scope of the scene, or whatever, start off slow. And then if you need to pick up the pace once you're comfortable with what it is that you're saying, you can speed things up. All right, next issue, overemphasis, explosive consonants, and over-enunciation. This usually derives from the actor's insecurity or a lack of trust in his or her ability to communicate. If someone is over-enunciating, you can hear that when someone speaks, and it sounds very unnatural. As a matter of fact, the natural flow is gone because you're putting so much emphasis on every syllable and every consonant. And at times it can sound like it's just getting too loud at unnatural points. The way to correct this, stay focused on your thought and just tell the story. Don't overthink it. Don't get over anxious about it. Just understand what it is that you're trying to say. Then say it. Next one, lack of mobility in the face, jaw, or lips. Call this the Boomhauer syndrome for you fans of King of the Hill. And let me tell you something about these notes. I tell you, why we always going to do these notes and do them all. Kind of crazy, you know what I mean? Most of you probably didn't understand a word I just said there because I wasn't moving my lips. And my face was just kind of static. It wasn't moving around at all. Some of the issue here might be due to insecurity. It might be a reluctance to communicate, kind of that same problem where there's just not enough confidence there, and as a result, you slur your words and the speech gets kind of mumbled. So to correct that, one thing you can do is work on facial stretching exercises. And in a way, we're almost kind of going back to another problem of over-enunciation. When you over-enunciate words, it forces you to move your face. Try reading a sentence and speak every word of every syllable, and you'll see what I mean. Now, of course, you want to find the happy medium there, rather. You don't want to over-enunciate, but you also don't want to mumble. So it comes, all these things kind of flow together in one way or another. You need to be able to understand your story, understand your character, know where you are in the scope of the conversation, and have a certain amount of confidence in the fact that you know all of those things, and that's going to come out in the way that you deliver your lines. Clipped vowels. Many people think logically, and logical thinking can result in a speech pattern in which all parts of a word are treated equally. This often results in a monotone delivery with vowels being dropped. Because when you speak in monotone, you don't necessarily enunciate every sound. In order to correct that, you search for the emotion in the words being spoken. Let the happiness out. Let the sadness out. Let the anger out. Whatever it is. Don't just deliver words on a page like you're trying to read through words on a page to get rid of the words on the page. Speak with emotion. The proper emotion for the particular line, for the particular character. Breathiness and devoicing consonants. You notice if you hear somebody that has a bit of breathiness in their voice, that they're letting too much air out, they tend to not enunciate as well because not every sound gets out. It's the result of exhaling too quickly or exhaling before starting to speak and trying to quickly catch your breath. That chops off certain sounds at the beginning of a sentence or at the end of a sentence. Nervousness and anxiety can cause this problem. To correct that, do your breathing exercises. Breathe from your diaphragm. Relax. Be careful not to rush. So what we're saying here is, at the very least, take enough time to be more intentional about your breathing. Excessive resonance or an over-emotional quality. This is usually the result of becoming more wrapped up in the emotion than the understanding for the reason for the emotion, if you're kind of living from an emotional center. This almost sounds critical, especially if you naturally happen to be a person that tends to be more emotional than your friends, your family, your acquaintances. But it can result in a bit of over-dramatic delivery. To try to correct that, do your best to become a little more objective and less reactive. Not every line is the result of putting out a fire or coming to a snap decision. Try to be rational in the way that the emotion should come out, and your speech will be more clear as a result. Now, let's talk about accents a little bit. I have some information on accents that go a little more in detail into this, but one thing I want to say at the very beginning is that if you have a natural accent, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We've become more and more accepting of different accents in different places. And sometimes an accent can help you to be better skilled at doing certain types of characters. And sometimes it could just be that you represent a certain part of the country or a certain culture. However, if you want to be well received on a broad geographic level, you might need to develop the skill, I should say, to modify your delivery style that is expected and accepted by the general population of your region. So, a good example of this is if you listen to local television and radio. You do have a certain segment of it that people try to sound as general American as they can, not necessarily show any sort of an accent or a dialect. But if you listen to smaller stations, or if you listen to people on the street, you're going to hear more localism. And in general, people tend to trust more people that sound like them. And people tend to believe in a character more when they sound like they're from a particular area. So, just because you have a particular accent, maybe you need to work on it to do certain types of work, but you might also be well received by certain segments of the population depending on the type of work that you're doing. In the United States, most voiceover talent perform with the standard, non-accented American English, or what's called the general American dialect. And for the most part, we tend to associate that with kind of a Midwestern to Western sort of sound. So like Colorado into Nebraska is where we tend to think of the general American dialect. And then as you go around the country, you're going to hear all different sorts of spins on general American English. Everything from what many of us know around here, the Southern accent, to going more towards the Northeast. What are you talking about? I ain't got no accent. You got the accent. I ain't got no accent. Going over to the West Coast, where everything's gnarly, dude. And I'm kind of overplaying some of these things, but you get what I'm saying. It does take some work to try to remove accents if that is your goal. And it can be done. What's really interesting is when you hear actors from the United Kingdom, from New Zealand, from Australia, able to speak a perfect general American accent. I find that fascinating. So if you have a natural accent and you want to do voice acting, first off, refine your accent. Use it to your advantage. Don't shy away from it. Embrace it. But at the same time, you may also want to learn how to adapt your speaking voice to mimic other accents. And if you're getting to where it's becoming difficult for you to change your voice, if that's what you desire to do, you can work with a diction coach to help you to be able to solve that problem. So that's going to be a good place for us to break. We will finish up the notes with part C of chapter 2, and I'll catch you over on that video.